Hey folks, welcome back. I'm standing here in front of my sawmill inside my newly built saw shed. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the features I see a lot of questions coming in the videos about, and hopefully that gives you an understanding of what I was thinking when I bought this model, when I was going for this particular sawmill, what features I was looking for. Before we get there though, I'm going to turn on the lights in here. It is a little on the dark side. It's also a little bit wet. Have a look down there. Flip these on, and wow, that's a difference, isn't it? One of the reasons I went for the lights was just for these days where it's a little on the dark side. You need a bit of light to see things. So if you didn't know already, this is my brand new sawmill, my Clarke sawmill, model 350-38. This sawmill came from a shop down in Omemee, Ontario called Shamrock Welding and Repair. These folks built this thing and they spec'd it exactly as I was looking for, and they did one heck of a job. If you're interested in seeing this down at the factory, hearing from Melvin, one of the owners and fabricators, I would encourage you to check out that video. Now this model, the 350-38, is not the 350-38 XP. I see a lot of comments down in my previous videos. People are mistaking this for one of the other models that is sold by Clarke Sawmills. This model, although looks similar, it does have a few different features, and so just keep that in mind if you're looking on their website. The person to call to get all the info though, Melvin, as I mentioned, you give him a call. He knows all about the machines because he built them, and he'll tell you not only about my model, the 350-38 XP, the model 338, the 200 model, the 50 model, and all the models in between. He'll give you the once over of all those models if you give him a call. Now this model has some things on it that I really wanted. I absolutely had to have if I was going to take that giant leap into the next sawmill era, we'll call it. And some of those things include steel band wheels. I wanted those. I wanted a debarker. I wanted the log stops. So where are we here? Log stops on this side. I wanted the log clamps on that side. I wanted a chain log turner. I wanted a log loader, sort of later in my decision process. I also wanted to have sort of a control station like this. I wanted the wood to come back to me. I didn't want to be doing any more walking back and forth between the saw head and the actual logs itself. I also wanted those drag back arms, and this was a nice addition. I wasn't thinking these originally, but I think it goes hand in hand with the arms there. Some other things I wanted a diesel engine for the torque, and aside from that, the lasers. Oh, and I know I'd forget some things. I also wanted log stops that went vertical. I didn't want them to fold up. One of the concerns I had with folding log stops, although it may be somewhat unlikely, if you get a log up there and it's not perfectly straight, maybe a little piece of the log is sticking out, what can happen when that arm folds up? It can hit it and prevent it from coming all the way up. So I like the ability to have them vertical. And I know there's going to be people out there who disagree with me, and that's all right. We can agree to disagree, but I wanted a vertical log stop. And anyways, just one of the things there. I also wanted, now that I see it, I wanted roller guides. The roller guides apply down pressure on the blade, helps to maintain blade stability. I wanted that. I like the fact that we ended up having the wipers, so you can see it's a felt wipe that goes on both sides of the blade, and that applies the lubricant. In this case, we're using diesel, just one drip every second or so, but I wanted that wipe that keeps that lubricant right on the blade. It can't fly off. So just a few things there, and you know, this had the whole package, hence why it's here. So if we break things down a bit, why'd I want that debarker? I wanted it because it's going to allow me to prolong the time between blade sharpenings. This cuts a little groove in the log, cuts through that bark, whether there's dirt in there or ice or whatever, cuts a little groove so that when the blade does enter, it's entering clean wood. I wanted that because this is presumably going to be the last sawmill I ever buy. And so if I have it now, then I'm never going to think about what I could have had if I didn't get it. Now this thing is fully adjustable. I can adjust the hydraulic flow to the motor here to speed up or slow down the cut. I can also adjust the pressure that's applied on the log. That'll be in place in another day. Now some other things I wanted, maybe we'll head over here to the log stops. Why did I want them on this side? Now this is not the same on every sawmill brand. You'll go out there and you'll see different arrangements, obviously. I wanted it on this side because that's going to allow me to limit the number of times a blade has to go through bark. Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, Sandy, you just said you got a debarker so you don't have to go through bark ever. You're absolutely right. But the truth is, not everyone will get a debarker on their sawmill. And so having these on this side of the sawmill is convenient. If these were on the other side, what happens is you have to cut through the bark 3 times while you're rotating the log, taking the slabs off, before you get to cut into clean wood. If you have it on this side, you only cut through on the first pass. Once that first pass is made, you now have a flat edge on the top. You can rotate it against those log stops this way. And now you're cutting through clean wood. And if you can imagine, you rotate it again, you're cutting through clean wood again and again until the cant is made. Now, if these were on the other side, if you can imagine, that blade comes across on the first cut, makes a flat cut. Well, that log, instead of turning this way, it has to turn the other way because you have to have a flat edge against that log stop. So now you're cutting through the bark again. Rotate it, cutting through it again. You have to do that 3 times before that blade ever gets into clean wood. If you have a debarker, that might be different, but let's face it, not everyone will. And so if you aren't getting a debarker, I really like this feature on this side. Now, I saw the question in the comments a few times. Isn't the log just going to roll off the other side of the sawmill when you lift it up here with the log loader? No. What'll happen is, when I'm back at the station, when I'm back standing here, I'm going to raise up those log stops. Those are going to prevent the log from rolling right off the sawmill. Now, when I lift it up, I'm not trying to throw it over the other side of the sawmill. I'm going to take it easy. So the log sometimes will probably just roll up here. It won't even get anywhere near the log stops. But in any case, those will be up just in case. Once the log's up, I raise these up and I push the log against it. Now, I have heard people say before that it's also a bit better to have the log stops on this side of the sawmill as opposed to that side, just in case you are rolling big logs up here day after day, and one of them gets away from you, and it goes really hard against the log stops, which if they were over here would be extended. It's suggested that if they were over there and you hit them too hard too many times, they could bend. And you can't have a log stop that is not 90 degrees to this bunk, otherwise you're not going to get square cants or lumber. So that's one of the suggestions. If something has to give, it would be better that it's a log clamp than a log stop, because the log clamp can be slightly bent, although looking at these, I don't think that's a problem. But it could be, and you're still going to have a square surface here with the log stops to the bunk to give square cants and lumber. Now, another thing that I was sort of mulling over when I was trying to find the perfect sawmill was log rollers. If I was going to a fully, built sawmill, I had to make sure that I could have something to roll logs. I wanted a chain roller. I wanted the ability for the roller also to move the log both ways, bidirectional. And so that's where this came in. Not to mention, this thing is built. That's a 120 roller chain. And so when I first saw it, I knew for certain I wouldn't have a problem with damaging that thing. So let's make our way up here. Some things I absolutely had to have, as I was mentioning before, was those roller guides. I wanted down pressure on the blade. I wanted to have cuts as absolutely smooth as I could get. And I feel like having roller guides with that down pressure is the ticket. Match in there the felt in order to add the lubricant. I thought that was going to be a great idea, great long-term cutting. Now let's swing to the other side here. I want to talk about something that I absolutely wanted to have on my next sawmill. I thought long and hard about this. I looked around, I did my research, and I figured out that this is what I wanted. And what that is, it's band wheels without belts. So we'll open this one up, and they get held up there by that magnet. So these are 26-inch band wheels. Now, they don't have a belt on them at all. There's a crown in there. One of the reasons I decided I wanted to have steel band wheels without belts is I didn't want any vibrations. Now, I know what you're saying. My sawmill has belts. It has no vibrations. And that's fine. And I'm sure there are many sawmills out there that cut really, really well without belts, or with belts rather, and they have no vibration. My thinking was if I could eliminate at least one variable, the variable being an additional belt, and I had the blade riding directly on steel, I was less likely to have vibrations because these would be true. Perfectly round, they spin perfectly smoothly, and there's nothing to wear in there. Now keep in mind, over a long period of time, you could wear the steel, and if that happens, then I could take it to a machine shop, have it re-ground so it's perfectly smooth again, perfectly round. But there's no variable like a belt to get frayed, to get built up with sawdust, to break. And so in my mind, that was the perfect solution, to have a spinning assembly that allowed for that blade to cut perfectly flat lumber. That was my thinking. So while we're here, let's talk a little bit about the board drag back fingers there. I really wanted that. That was a deal breaker if it didn't have it. And the reason being is I have a bit of a command station back here. I have full control of all the log turning, log clamping, the log loading way back there. I didn't want to have to walk from there up to here just to deal with lumber after I cut it. Now, I probably could push the lumber onto the log loader, but then I still have to come up here and unload it somehow before I can load another log on it to continue sawing. What I wanted to do for my sort of layout and my flow was have the logs piled up right here, have them come up with the log loader onto the deck, saw it, get rid of the lumber all the way out the back, probably have it come off this roller here at the back, load it into a pile of some sort, maybe even a wagon, something back there, and then this area is free. And so the next log can just be rolled up there. I don't have to worry about cutting, unloading lumber just to make room for the next log. I think that whole process will make it more enjoyable for me and certainly speed things up. And sort of going hand in hand with those drag back fingers, I needed to have some sort of tray, something like this, where the lumber comes off the sawmill, off those fingers there, and it lands. That way, if I didn't want to deal with the lumber immediately, maybe I wanted to cut 3 or 4 pieces of lumber, drag them back here before I moved them, I could do so. I didn't have to deal with one at a time. Let's talk a little bit about the engine here. Now, my particular model, I opted for a diesel engine. This is a 37 horsepower Kubota diesel. Now, if you call Melvin down at Clarke Sawmills, he'll tell you all about the engine options available. There are other options available, but that's often going to come down to the model. Now, if you're looking on the website, the 350/38 XP, which this is not, it has a 120 horsepower diesel. That's a 37 horsepower diesel. I thought that was going to be adequate for what I saw. Depending on your scenario, you can opt for different engines. They also have gas engines as well. And I'm sure, as I mentioned, Melvin would be the guy to talk to there. But there's that unit. And I opted for that because the diesel engine has a lot more torque than a gas engine. And because of that, that's going to allow me to get through the lumber a bit easier. I'm looking for torque more so than I'm looking for horsepower, especially when things get tough. That'll pull that blade right through. And so I sprang for the diesel. Now, one of the things with the diesel, I live in a cold climate, I got a block heater. So I can plug that thing in if necessary, and that'll get that thing up and going. So for me, I knew if I was going to buy a sawmill one more time, at least that's what I'm thinking, for the rest of my life, I wanted the engine that I thought would last definitely longer than I do. 37 horse diesel Kubota, I think that is it. And so that's why I went with that. That would be a deal breaker for me. It has to be a diesel. Gas engine, yeah, absolutely it works. I just thought for my application, knowing that this is pumping hydraulic fluid as well, I wanted that extra torque, I wanted the diesel. So with this diesel, you may not be familiar, but there's a hydraulic pump up there. And that hydraulic pump is connected to that red hydraulic tank there, so all the fluid's in there. The pump is going to give me control of 99% of the sawmill. You know, when we talk about the saw head going forward, backwards, up and down, we talk about things like the debarker, the end feed toe boards, the log clamps, the log stops, the log loader. That's all driven off that engine and that hydraulic pump. The blade, however, the blade, which you can sort of see through there, you see the pulley in the belt, that goes up to the front of the diesel engine here, where there's a clutch. So that engine is going to directly drive that blade with that clutch, and all the other hydraulic features are powered off the engine, off that hydraulic pump. So when we talk about wants, absolutely positively, I wanted a station. I wanted a place I could park myself, oversee all the sawing from, and I wanted that to be adjacent to where the lumber came off, and it is. So I'm working obviously right here. I have all my controls, and right here I can take the lumber. I can also see right down through the cut, and I really like that, and so that was something I wanted in a general layout. Now this unit right here, I haven't talked about it, I haven't fired it up in any videos yet. It is coming very shortly. This was something that was one of those things I thought about for the long term. I've always wanted Setworks. I've never had one on a sawmill, but I thought if I was going to spring for everything that I wanted in one sawmill to last me the rest of my life, then I needed to have it on this mill. And so that's why I went for this. And Melvin came up with his mounting location, and I think it's pretty good. Full protection around the computer Setworks, and obviously right adjacent to where I'm sawing. So let's get back to talking about one thing here, and that's direct action hydraulics. What was that main reason I went for that as opposed to any other type of system that's out there? I'm used to hydraulics. All my heavy equipment has hydraulics on it. They're relatively simple systems in my opinion. Basically what you have the engine that's going to drive a pump. The pump gets the fluid from the tank, and then that fluid gets pressurized, sent wherever it needs to go. And it can go to things like motors, it can go to hydraulic cylinders, and ultimately what controls it is valves. And the valves are pretty simple mechanisms. They go one way, they go another way, obviously depending on the valve. Relatively simple system. There's not a ton of moving parts there, comparatively speaking. And so based on my experience with it, I decided in all these harsh conditions I have, especially out here sawing wood in the winter time, ice covered, cold, warm in the summer, dusty, I decided hydraulics were going to be the ticket. They also have an awful lot of power as well as adjustability. Now, just looking at the debarker here as an example, I have this little needle valve. This needle valve controls how fast that blade spins. Well, that is pretty easy for me to figure out. If I need that to spin faster, I can open this needle valve up, allow more flow. If I want it to spin slower, I can tighten the needle valve so less flow goes to that particular motor. Simplicity like that with hydraulics was the reason I went direct action, as well as the reliability. Now, with all of these hoses, you're probably saying to yourself, what happens if they get a hole in them? Well, what happens if anything breaks? That's inevitable. It will eventually. Knock on wood, it doesn't for a long time. But what happens? I get it repaired. The good thing about direct action hydraulics, hydraulic motors, hydraulic cylinders, valves, hoses, I can get it fixed just about anywhere that has heavy equipment service. I don't have to go back to Clarke Sawmill if I don't want, although I'd be happy to. Melvin's a great person, very friendly. But I don't have to. I can go to any hydraulic shop. I can go to a heavy equipment manufacturer, dealer. They'll all have the ability to make me a replacement hose. And that is very convenient for me. I don't live anywhere near an urban center. I don't have a huge variety of options for getting replacement parts. And because all the parts are relatively generic, including all the hydraulic parts, I can get stuff fixed, back up and running without much headache. Because I don't know about you, one of the biggest headaches I have is breakdowns. Especially when you got something you really want to do and you're waiting. You're waiting on a part, you're waiting on something to open, and it's not open, and you want to saw. I want it fixed. I want to go to the store, hardware store, dealer, hydraulic shop, wherever. I want to go there. I want to go there now. I want it replaced, and I want a saw. That's the reason I wanted simplicity, and that's why I went with hydraulics. Now, of course, depending on your background, you might be better at electric circuitry than I am. I know a little bit of stuff, but I have a really hard time when I open something up and I look at a circuit board, and there's about 50 different colors of wires. There's relays in there, there's connection points. and I don't know exactly how to diagnose things, at least not easily, without a bunch of work. And so I'm leaving that for someone else. When I've got a sawmill and it's hydraulic, it's relatively simple. I can most of the time see where something's leaking. I can then trace it back and figure out exactly what has to be fixed. I can plug a hole in something temporarily. I can shut a valve to prevent all that fluid from leaking out. I can do all that. But when it comes down to that complex circuitry, that's where my brain starts to expand a bit too much, and I start thinking of calling her quits for the day and crying. Not actually, but you get the point. Anyways, that's going to do it for me here today. Make sure you come back real soon. As I said, I'm digging out logs as best I can. I will get one up here real soon, and we will saw. As you can see, I've already got a blade up there. I test fit it. We're just about ready to rock. Hopefully see you then.